Hey everyone, David here, and I've got some exciting news to share. I've decided to write a book, and I've entitled it Psychosocial Hazards Are Real. The book is intended to help clarify the fact that psychological safety cannot be achieved without paying attention to the psychosocial hazards people are being exposed to. Despite how much individuals might be interested in treating others with kindness, dignity, and respect, many cultures are so full of psychosocial traps that no psychological health and safety effort can ultimately succeed. But to address psychosocial hazards, you first have to know what they are, and you have to have some idea what to do to address them. Though the book won't be 100% complete until the spring of 2025, I'd like to share a unique opportunity to reserve a copy during the book presale campaign. The campaign will run from September 16th to October 18th, 2024. This will be an opportunity to get one of the first copies of the book, tickets to the book launch event, and other opportunities to learn more about psychosocial hazards. For more information, you can go to my personal LinkedIn or Facebook page, or the LinkedIn, Facebook, or webpage for ID2 Solutions. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity. Now, back to this episode of the podcast. Despite the increased awareness of the importance of workplace mental health, it's relatively rare for a Black worker to find mental health support that shares their cultural perspective, particularly a Black male. We'll be talking with a therapist who just happens to be both Black and male up next on this episode of the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety. Welcome to this week's Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. So, due to their personal and cultural experiences, Black therapists bring a unique perspective to their practice. They can offer a deeper understanding of the challenges and systemic issues that clients of similar backgrounds face, such as racial discrimination, cultural identity, and social inequity. This cultural competence can help build stronger rapport and trust with clients who may feel misunderstood and may feel a lack of validation in their other experiences with therapists. Moreover, Black male therapists can often serve as a powerful role model, challenging stereotypes and promoting positive mental health within their communities. Their presence in the therapeutic field can help address the underrepresentation of Black professionals and encourage more open conversations about mental health, especially among Black men and boys. In this episode, we'll be discussing some of the challenges that folks face that cause them to seek out Black therapists. And in this case, we're going to be having a conversation with a therapist who just happens to be both Black and male. Often when I do these podcast episodes, some of the conversations I have are not as close to me as others. This obviously is a fairly close one to me, having had some opportunities to be in therapy over the course of my life. And I have found that generally my therapeutic experience has been more comfortable when the person on the other end of the therapeutic session looks like me. So we're going to get started, as I so often do, with an introduction of my guest by my guest with this question: Who is Mat Jeanius?
Wow, thank you for having me on this podcast. I've been looking forward to this date for a very long time. Who is Matt Genius? The short answer is Matt Genius is a novel that I have recently became the author of maybe 7 to 8 years ago. And in this novel, you will find stories of brotherhood, of fatherhood, of, of love of music, nature, of mental wellness for men, of growth, of trauma, of reframing, but most of all, a lot of joy.
Right. Right. Well, we're going to thumb through some of the pages of the novel
Let's
for
go.
for a few moments. One other though, before we get into the heart of the matter, one other rather standard question that I ask. So, what does psychological health and safety mean to you?
Right. So, as a mental health professional, before I could answer any question that is close to mental health, I have to then preface what mental health is for me to give a complete answer. So, when I think of mental health, mental wellness, I think of ourselves parsed out into three components. When you think about seeing this, then it gives you a better representation of what mental health is for a lot of people who may not give mental health value because it's not seen. And so, what mental health is for me is of the physical body that's represented by just our thoughts, right? So, see a body that just represents your thoughts, see a body that represents your emotions, and see the physical body as it represents itself as it interacts with the world. When you merge those three together, that's your mental health, right? Your mental wellness is those three combined, right? And so when I think about psychological health and safety, I think about the health of my brain that houses my thoughts. I think about the health of my heart, of my body that houses my emotions. I also think about my physical body as it interacts with the world in its wellness. So when I think about psychological health and safety, I think about the physical representation in the body, the emotional aspects that we carry, and the thoughts that we have that are the highest that we can have based on our safety.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. That's very layered. There's a lot there. Um, a lot there that I think we, as human beings, we have these kind of times in our lives when these thoughts kind of cross our mind, and at least my experience has been when I start getting into conversations about kind of this the mind body connection, what's going on in my mind, how it affects my body, that I've found that some people they tend to roll their eyes back and go, "Oh, here comes that foo-foo stuff again," and come on, that's is that really all that serious? And again, as I am the first to admit, and I continue to repeat, I am not a mental health provider, mental health service provider. I'm not a psychologist or any of that type of thing. I'm a safety guy. But that's what this conversation for me is about: is helping people to understand that this bifurcation that we've made, this separation we've tried to make between what's going on in the physical body and what's going on in the mind are two separate things. They're not. They're absolutely connected. And I think often that we wait until we see some physical manifestation of what's going on, and then we kind of go, well, what were they thinking? And when we should have been focused on what they were thinking even before the physical manifestation showed up, because there's things going on in our mind, in our thoughts, and in our emotions that are actually trying to give us signals about something that's coming up in our body later on. And we kind of, again, have been sometimes value cultured, sometimes just the folks around us have told us, don't worry about that. Just push through it. It'll get better. And I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if it'll get better just by acting like it doesn't exist.
Right. There's a lot that, like you said, is multi-layered, but I like to start with something that will allow people to, easily join in this understanding of the multi-layered of the thoughts, the emotions, and the physical body, right? So I'm a foodie, right? I love food. And so for most people, when they think about their favorite food, when they think about it, what happens inside their mouth? Start to salivate, right? A thought just changed the way your physical body then reacted from the thought. And what I like to do with this example is that I allow them to layer this thought. I ask them, what's your favorite food? Right? And they tell me, I was like, okay, that sounds good. What is the best space that you can get this food from? So now I'm attaching this food to an experience they had, which then invokes some emotion, right? So, oh, I like to get my pizza from Mama John's Pizza, right? Go to Mama John's, right? And Mama John's is great. So you have this pizza. What would be a great drink to have with this pizza? Now they're thinking about it more and they're pairing the food with the drink. They have the drink. I'm like, okay, you know what? Where would be a good place to enjoy this meal? Front yard, backyard, on the beach. And they're naming this place. Now you start to see expressions of joy, of excitement in them based on thought. And then here's the catcher. I asked them, who would be the people that you would invite to this gathering of you enjoying this food that will make the food experience even better. Oh man, my brother, my sister, my mom, I have all these. And now they're excited based on the thought, right? The thought then invokes emotion, then invokes reaction physically that represents what we're thinking based on our mouth salivating. This was done by Pavlov, classical conditioning, ringing the bell. And so all these things are very present inside of us. It's just the awareness of the connection between our thoughts, our emotions, and our physical body. Now, to go on the more traumatic end, let's say you had to now think of a traumatic experience. There's a great example of this when I can't remember where I first saw this, but we would ask people to hold their arms out and ask them to think of a really positive experience, something that brings them joy. And we'll try to push their arm down with just a tap. It wouldn't go anywhere because the experience that they're thinking about is more positive. Then we ask them to think about something that creates grief or sadness. With just a tap, it doesn't matter how strong the person is, the arm is going down, right? Because the thoughts now create a different experience in the body that allows you to feel more feeble without even a full knowledge of that feebleness or full knowledge of you being more susceptible to dis-ease, right? Based on our thoughts. So when we go even further and speak about traumatic experience, you're talking about an imprint that sometimes plays over and over to create physical reactions inside of us, right? And this study has been done in a wide range of settings where you would approach a child with different objects and see how they react. And if the reaction isn't positive based on whatever the person has in their hand, then you can see that there may have been some experiences based on that child's reaction. So, what I'm saying is that it's connected. We just have to pay attention. And a great study that really, or a great theorist that really highlights this is Dr. Bruce Perry, that wrote this book, What Happened to You with Oprah Winfrey, where he talks about the regulated mind versus the dysregulated mind. The regulated mind offers up so many opportunities for growth mentally, emotionally, physically. The dysregulated mind offers a lot of opportunity for survival, right? For our survival, which then takes us into our autonomic nervous system, which then secretes adrenaline and cortisol in our system. With the presence of adrenaline and cortisol, we can do more for the immediate, but the long-term effects of having adrenaline and cortisol left in our system start to then decay, starts to then allow our systems to be weak. And this is more prevalent in our vulnerable population, our children, right? And so to understand this connection between the brain, our thoughts, our emotions, and our body will then give you an advantage to then store what our thoughts are, the emotions, and even some of the physical spaces we occupy to maintain the health and safety of our mental and emotional wellness.
Wow. Wow. So how wow. So how did how did you become interested in and you're a marriage and family therapist. So how'd you become interested in that? I mean, I can't recall, sitting around in, fifth, sixth, seventh, or eighth grade thinking about therapists and stuff like that. It's maybe personally you may have, but I'd be curious to find out how this became a professional interest of yours.
It became a professional interest because I wanted to learn more about myself, how I showed up in this world. Just through curiosity, I was in a class called Law Study in high school. And I'm going to fast forward really quick. The course allowed us to then do a mock trial where we had to then select different roles. I played the role of a psychiatrist that was defending somebody on a murder trial. The terminology that I came across that really grabbed my attention was a terminology called learned helplessness. And these two words didn't sound like they need to be together in my little junior mind in high school. I'm like, doesn't make sense. So I did a little bit more research to find out that it's a condition that someone find themselves in when they have accepted a hopeless or helpless reality as their truth, meaning they don't believe that it's going to get any better than where it is right now. So they've adopted the helpless understanding of I might as, what am I going to do? There's nothing that I can do. And if I do leave, I'll probably end up in a similar situation. So the expression is, you better stay with the devil you know than the devil you don't, right? And so we've adopted these things. Once I learned that terminology, I saw it everywhere. I saw it in my community. I grew up in the inner city of Miami called Opalaka. I saw it in some of the relationships, even in high school, where there was, domestic violence in these relationships. Learn helplessness, accepting these realities as your own, and not believing that it can get any better. So fast forward, I'm in undergrad studying psychology and theology up in Huntsville, Alabama, and I, was always volunteering. So I found myself volunteering at a juvenile center for 3 years, and it was a great time because it allowed me to then learn how to really show up for young Black boys. But when I was leaving, I realized that the impact I was having on them was more work. It was intervention. I was reaching them at a very emotional stage in their life, at a very tumultuous stage in their lives. These young men are incarcerated, and so I only have them for a short period of time, and then they're back. And so when I was graduating, or approaching graduation, I was thinking about where can I make the most impact when it comes to young Black lives. What field can I study that will allow me to then have an impact the way I would like to have an impact? Now, this is a person that volunteered at high schools, community centers, juvenile centers, churches. I had a lot of volunteering experience, and I saw by going into the communities, by lived experience, the community I lived in, that we need something different than just a person to talk to on a one-on-one basis. And so I was studying different theorists and different schools of thoughts when it comes to grad school, and I found a theorist called um, Murray Bowen. And Murray Bowen is the founder of transgenerational theory, which is a theory that discusses the generations prior and how they impact the current generation. And I saw something that explained my family issues right there in front of us, called the transgenerational family process, that talked about the issues that the fathers and the mothers may carry. You'd find these issues being projected on the kids. And so, therefore, if the kid may not have had that issue, by them projecting it, the kid will then fill in that role to create what the parents are looking for in that child. And I saw a lot of these questions being answered to see some of the ills my father experienced when he was younger that was showing up in my brother and myself and my sister, based on him not doing the work to then better himself, to then be a different example or to be a different parent to us. And so I was locked in. Family therapy was it for me. It brought to my attention systems theories, which is a perspective that allows us to see problems not based on the individual, but looking at the systems that are around this individual to see how the individual may be impacted by their home, by their culture, by their school, by their religion, by their, you name it. And so this was like light bulb, you know. Now I can see us in a different way. Now I can see that the divide between what we used to say the kids on the other side of the train track weren't necessarily better. They probably had different systems that allowed them to grow up in a healthier way. It allowed me to see myself not as a failure or as a kid that loved to fight, but as a kid that may have had dysregulation as a normalcy in my environment, so that wherever I went, I recreated that normalcy by looking, by inciting violence, even if it was just mentally in my mind. I was always looking, always had that edge of paranoia. Who's next? Right. And so these are things that I learned in family therapy that allowed me to show up for my community, for Black men in a different way.
Right. Right. Yeah. As you're speaking, the term that popped in my head uh, is fundamental attribution error, where we look at human beings, we look at people, and we somehow place more focus on what the individual is doing and not the environment where they're doing it. And we kind of miss out on, and again, I'm not, we could get into all kinds of conversations about, is it nature or nurture, and, personal responsibility and all that stuff it's important. Yeah, it is, but it's imbalanced. And often it's imbalanced, particularly by the way we kind of talk about these situations. And again, what's wrong with Matt? Well, why is there necessarily something wrong with Matt? There might be something wrong with the environment that Matt is in. Matt might be doing exactly what he was created to do, what he is best at, but the environment that he's in may not be accepting of that. And that's, much of the conversations we have on this podcast are focused around the workplace and how we spend so much of our, at least our, I'll say previous generations have. I'm starting to wonder if this is going to be what we'll do going forward, because I'm, meeting so many people who have just totally opted out of the traditional workplace environment because it's been the problem. It hasn't been me. So, and here's the way I discuss this is, so you start a business, and I repeat this often. When I do something, it is generally perfect for me. It works great for me. The challenge is when I invite Matt to participate, I don't even inquire how it's going to be good for him. I hire him, uh, bring him in to my thing that I've started, and then immediately do all that I can to try to uh, shave off the edges so he'll be more like I want him to be, so I can get out of him what I want to get out of him. When what we should be doing, not you or me, what we should be doing is trying to figure out how we can contribute to the thing that we've decided we want to participate in. And that's very different. That's not the command and control kind of approach. But you and I both decided to become a part of this thing, whatever this thing is, and you and I both have a role in it. And my role is no better or worse than yours. It may be different, but just because I'm the custodial person and you are the CEO doesn't make me any less than you. I just have a different role than you. And that's where it gets kind of lost, and it's all centered around, again, whoever's in power, and you got to be like me, and then I'll treat you however I want, and if you don't conform, then I'll just get rid of you and find somebody else. And I think folks are starting to kind of, I really don't know if I want to do that. I don't. That's not good for me. It's not great for my mental health. It's not great for my physical health. So I'm probably not going to do it. So before I again get too far off of that rabbit trail, some of that comes from my lived experience as a Black person in systems that were not built for or by people like me. I'm not saying that those are good or bad. I'm saying they weren't built for me. They were built by, often they were built by a cisgender middle class white male who, for him, it was great. And then I was brought in and told, well, you got to be like, and what I found is you're trying to make me like him. Again, I'm not saying that he's a bad guy. I'm saying that I'm not him, and I should be able to bring my own experience, bring my own worldview, bring my own, and all this is also very important, at least in this conversation, in that episode's going to be released during February, which is the one month of the year where we talk about Black history. So what, in your view, as a therapist, have you seen in terms of I don't know the demographics of the folks that you see, but some of the challenges that you found that Black people have in the workplace that other people either typically do not or often do not?
Yeah, I think the challenges that you speak about are very real from the person that have been in corporate for a longer period of time than another person. And both of these individuals are people of color, but one has adopted the the culture of the workspace that allowed them to then show up that way, which may be detrimental to another person that is brand new to that environment that may not have adopted or knew this environment was toxic for them, right? An example is my lived experience when I was in graduate school and I completed my master's degree. I started the PhD program shortly after, which I did not complete because of my psychological safety. I had a close friend of mine that ended his life by suicide, a young Black man, that I needed to then take some time away from the field to take care of my mental and emotional health, right? And so taking that time away, I found myself at a predominantly, uh, I'm not going to say that part, but a large college and university in South Florida. I was working at this college and university in South Florida, and I was hired by a Black young woman that had was there for probably like 9 or 10 years, and this is my first time coming in. Now the culture there, she was used to, right? That culture became normal for her, and what I was supposed to do was jump in and adopt that culture as normal for me, and it was not normal. It was a very intense, pressure driven, deadline driven, midnight emails, all these different things that at some point at my time there, I was grinding my teeth at night. I was grinding my teeth at night because of the high levels of stress. I would drive to work feeling very tense and rigid in my body. I wasn't healthy. And I saw the difference clearly between where she was. She had adopted this and what was quoted as, I work well under pressure. I work well under pressure. And what some people don't understand about the dysregulated brain is that your IQ diminishes significantly when stress is elevated in your body, when anger, when sadness, when grief, when even hunger, right? This nigga commercial that was made famous, you're not yourself when you're hungry. That's a dysregulatory factor. It takes you outside of your normalcy to put you somewhere where your brain functions aren't even at their best, right? Your functioning IQ is what he calls it, isn't at its peak, right? So once you cross over the threshold where you're dysregulated, you're not going to be performing at your best. And I wasn't performing at my best because I was stressed. And so therefore, we had a space where we clashed, where I had to advocate for myself. And in advocating for myself, I was told that I was being insubordinate. I was told that I was causing, problems for other employees. I was told all these things because I was advocating for my own mental and emotional safety, right? And so these experiences aren't just mine. Plenty of individuals that I've seen have now learned how to, right, learn helplessness, adopt these situations as normal. Well, you got to get it done, right? You went corporate, right? As if going corporate is better than what we're leaving. What are we leaving to go corporate, right? What is corporate and what does that mean for me as far as the safety that I have in thought, the emotions that I carry with me, and my physical body? Does corporate then understand who Matt is and and have made space for me to show up as my best? And those weren't the experience that I've had. One other example that I give you really quick is I was working at a prison, an all women's prison, work release prison, where these women were at the very last point of their sentences where they were allowed to leave the prison, go and work. I was called by my supervisor, soft, at a meeting, right? Soft. She called me soft. And this has to be noted because I wouldn't, in fact, uh, um, charges on the client on some of the inmates, because I wouldn't do room inspections to then find an infraction to then increase their sentence. And for me, I was like, as a therapist, I don't think that will allow me to align with my clients in a healthy way if I'm seen as a person that can lower or increase their sentence by doing room inspections. And so at that point, I knew I wasn't safe. If my supervisor can call me soft in a room full of other employees, right? If you're at the helm and you can say that to a person based on the decision they made on their ethics, right? As a mental health professional, I didn't think it was wise for us to carry that out, but then I was called soft as a result. As if to say, me showing empathy or me giving grace to a person based on them serving time and being at their very end, about to do something great with their lives, treating them with some human dignity and decency, now I'm soft, right? And so these things are what shaped my supervisor, who's also a person of color, right? That could not understand that what I was doing was for my safety and for the safety of those that I was serving as well.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
Yeah, the definition of a psychosocial hazard, at least in my research, is a psychosocial factor that's perceived or experienced by the person exposed as a threat that motivates them to behave in a different way. And if to the extent people can accept that definition, they will understand what you just talked about. Because and again, this is not a judgment, this is not even a criticism of how other people behave. It's simply an observation that, to me, based on my perception about what you said, how that connects to my own experience about similar kinds of behaviors, how that causes me to feel the threat that arises when I see and feel that kind of way causes me to want to do something different, causes me to, oh, hold up. So I can feel my heart rate increasing. I can feel my palms getting sweaty. I can feel myself kind of backing away physically, leaning back. It causes me to react different. Now, if none of those three things happen, we've got a little conflict. Well, yeah, sometimes I don't like, but yeah, it's okay. Some people will say things I don't particularly like all the time and won't necessarily agree with, but it doesn't cause me to act any, because I don't feel threatened by that. I don't feel like that's going to be a big deal for me. And even if it is going to be a deal, it's not a deal so much of, sometimes, I can convince myself for whatever reason that, I'm okay. I don't have to do anything different to protect myself. It is when all of those come together and I recognize it. And what makes it at least really challenging for me is when I then voice that, to me, that doesn't work well for me. That the way that you did that doesn't really work well for me. And it would be, and again, I try to use these examples that folks will recognize. It's, yeah, that chemical that you brought in. I had a situation, a place that I worked, they had brought in a company to resurface some floors. And the chemical that they were using was certified as non-toxic and all that type of thing. But we had one person who worked there who had sensitivity to it. So it wasn't inherently toxic. It just was sensitive to that person. So to that person, this person could not be in the area where that was going on because it would cause them to have respiratory problems. The same thing exists relative to how people feel about things. And their feelings aren't wrong. There's not something wrong with them. It simply means that that's how their mind and their body and their emotions react to that thing. So then the question is, what are we going to do about it? That's it. So How are we going to help? Do we? And we say, oh, yeah, we're family and we care about we care about them until they exhibit some behavior that's different from everybody else. And then all of a sudden, well, if Matt, he's just not a team player.
Yeah. That really kind of adds in the value of being a family therapist, because a lot of how we show up in the workforce are principles that we've adopted from our family, right? So, we've been, I'm talking about people of color, our people, right? We've been taught how to follow rules, right? We've been taught how to follow rules, and rules are important to follow. And in the context of time and space, it made sense for a period of time for us to be the people that always showed up following the rules, because it was for our safety when it comes to what we can do outside the home versus what we can do inside the home, right? And so those rules that our parents enforced us, make sure you listen when a person and all this, now allows us to show up in this world accepting unhealthy conditions. And we cannot advocate for ourselves, because if we do, we hear that small voice in our head saying, you shouldn't do that. Don't speak up. You're going to lose your job. You're complaining too much. So we feel like we are now fighting this war internally to be honest with our authentic selves, or just go somewhere we have to become someone else for the sake of someone else's bottom line. Right. And so I think what you were saying, or what I'm trying to, kind of bridge the gap, is that it really starts with the family system really advocating for the young ones. Like, for example, if you have a child that is dealing with trauma in the environment, then certain times they may just not need to go to school, right? I mean, but we got to go to school when you're sick, your leg's broken, go to school, right? You come to school with crutches. I'm like, what? Swollen eye, you're still in school, right? And so these things we know we have to then push through. So when the job calls, oh, you're sick. Oh, man, you're all right. You're fine. Come on in, right? And so now you have to fight not just the physical exhaustion, but the mental and the emotional, to be somewhere where you're not really shown the value of who you really are, of what you really feel you represent. And so it really starts with having different conversations at home, to have conversations where we can advocate for the child, let the child know that they're valuable in all spaces, and that their mind should be safe, right? Your thoughts are okay. Your emotions are okay. Your physical body is important, right? My daughter went to school this morning, and I was telling her before she went, you don't have to go. You have a cough. You should stay home. She get to school. An hour later, she calls me. I'm ready to go. you know? And so I'm teaching her how to, really advocate for yourself. This is not a mandatory thing to now put yourself at risk for the sake of whatever else is out there. You're to make sure that you are well mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Right, right. Yeah, a lot of these conversations, and there are folks who watch and listen to this all over, multiple countries, to be quite honest. Uh, and I make it, I make it my goal and intention to hear as many voices from as many different communities as possible. Uh, be but there are times when I specifically focus on. So I did my dissertation. The title was the lived experience of Black workers' exposure to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace, because that's a community that I understand and am a part of. I found that there were very few other forms of other safety related research done on how it causes Black people to feel at work. And I thought that was important. Sadly, this country, the United States, our economy is built off the backs of chattel slavery and a bunch of other forms of exploitation. And saying that, gets some people in a lather, but that's the truth. I'm not saying it still goes on the way it used to. Some parts of it actually still do. Uh, but a lot of it has changed. But to act like it didn't is kind of ridiculous. And then to assume that, that those centuries of trauma don't follow black people into the workplaces also, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. And so what I'm suggesting is not, I don't need to be treated with kid gloves. I need to be treated like a human being who has my own set of experiences that might be different from yours. And so how do you how so answer the question to those who feel like, well, why do we do I need to do anything special for those black people? How does that affect everybody else? We better be concerned about everybody else. And I'll lead you a little bit. My belief is if you help black people, you help all people. Just like if you help Jewish people or Muslims or gay people, or it doesn't, whoever you are deciding to help, you are also going to help others. But I think it's important that we really sometimes focus on, there are some folks that we bring into our systems that are hurt more by those systems than others. So the equity and the fix and the addressing those challenges should be a little bit more at least targeted. So talk to me a little bit about, from a mental health perspective, can a psychologically healthy and safe space for black people be beneficial
Of
for all people?
course, you're talking about the system again, right? And so if we are a part of this huge system, then we matter to the system, right? You remove us from the system is crippled, right? And so it will have a different energy that won't allow it to then thrive the way. When you think about ecosystems, they're so intricate. You remove the smallest thing from that ecosystem, and everything then has an imbalance, right? It's a domino effect. And so the opposite is also true, right? I have this thought in my head about wellness when it comes to what can come from wellness, because people don't believe that a difference can be made, right? The idea is to shut up and dribble. You have what you need already. What are you complaining about, right? And so my thoughts always go to the Jackson Five, which everybody knows about, and everybody knows their historical trauma when it came to their childhood. And so I would ask, what would be the difference in the Jackson Five if Joe Jackson wasn't the type of dad that he was? Right? And so people had to think about that and think, well, would they be as talented? Would they be as gifted? Would they go as far because they didn't have Joe there? And my thoughts is that, well, wellness produces something else, right? Wellness produces longevity. Wellness produces transgenerational healing. Wellness produces legacy. Wellness is what happens to us when we think 6 or 7 generations in the future. What my wellness will bring to the seeds of my seed, to the seeds of their seeds. That's what we're talking about when you think about the wellness of Black people in workspaces. When you think about the longevity of a company and you invite Black people into those spaces, their wellness will increase productivity. We do better when we're less stressed. You think you're getting great output based on the people you have working for you now, because you have their loyalty based on the dollar. Imagine when you have their hearts. Imagine when their hearts are safe, when their minds are safe, when their bodies are all aligned with the company. Man, the productivity will go up. It's not rocket science, it's a domino effect to the wellness of what can be produced, right? If you add fertilizer to a plant, it's gonna sprout, right? It's gonna blossom, right? And so adding the elements that we need, and what are those elements? I think we'd have to ask the questions, right? Home court advantage is what I think about. Home court advantage is when the home team plays at home, they have the advantage of having a relationship with that ecosystem, with the 3 point line, according to where they put up the most shots. And so home court advantage was me being in grad school, going to the same room in the library every time I needed to study for an exam, right? I would go to that room, I would do my rituals and feel good about myself, put on my music, and then boom, I'd be in a space where I created home court advantage. But there are spaces we go into where we have no say, no input, not even on the color that's on the screen, not even the background, not even the aroma, not even the cleaning products that we may not have issues. And so we don't have any input sometimes. And it impacts us because we're going there, having to then parse ourselves with who we really are. Our productivity goes down. But yet we're okay with that because you value this and that you value the bottom line, which is the dollars versus the equity of the person that will allow them to grow more provide more, and be there on a long term. We're used to then saying, oh man, I can replace you tomorrow, right? There are plenty of people just like you that would be happy with this job, in the same conditions that you're complaining about, right? And it goes to show that the human equity isn't as valuable as we think it is, specifically when it comes to Black and brown individuals. But we have to ask the questions: how can we then create environments, ecosystem where people feel like they have some sort of home court advantage, you know, and you can start there.
Right. Right. Wow. Yeah. There are, certainly other people out there, but I'll drop this figure on people who think that turnover is okay. Turnover in American businesses costs 1 trillion with a T, $1 trillion a year to our economy. So yeah, you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. There will probably be somebody else, but it's actually going to cost everybody, including you. So as we start to wrap, I wanted to another activity that you're involved in that I was curious about is so you do some work with a group, an organization called Race Realities. So share just a little bit about what that's about as we start to
Sure, sure.
wrap
So
here.
our founder, Dr. Deborah Stroman, man, her background is so much that I wouldn't even have time to talk about all of it. But what I can say is that she was doing these race-based conversations to a lot of businesses and organizations to where she would help create equitable understanding on what our experiences are as people of color, Black people, that we experience in these spaces, right? Helping them gain understanding. And in that work, she came across a lot of Black men that needed more than what she was offering in these spaces. And so last year was our first, well, this year was our first year where she solicited therapists, different speakers to then become a part of this cohort to travel to Costa Rica so we can do the reconnaissance work, get on the ground, do the retreat for ourselves first before we offered it up to the community at large, right? And let me tell you what it did for us. A group of 6 men, Black men, age range, lowest, youngest was 27, oldest was 63. We felt like children all over again based on the safety we experienced being away from the United States, being away from the oppressed system of going to work, the oppressed system of just traffic, going to the grocery store sometimes, what we can feel. We felt empowered being away. And then we learned and we leaned on each other to allow ourselves to experience the growth necessary to come back refueled. We were in Costa Rica, the east coast of Costa Rica, in a city called Cahuita, which is a city south of Limon, which is one of the predominantly Black cities. And let me tell you, it was magical to be outside as a Black man there. I mean, like I felt something that I cannot describe in words, that I could only say that I I felt like a child again, And when you see what kids bring to the table. They bring this innocence, they bring this curiosity, they bring this excitement to every day they wake up like, what am I going to do today? What's going to happen today? And I felt that way the entire time I was there, you know? And that experience allowed me to come back healthier, feeling detoxed. Of course, you talk about a retreat. There's diet, of course, that's different. There's exercise that we do. We had yoga, there was recreation. We went to a pool, we went to a waterfall. We did all those things, but I think the rich experience was us coming together as Black men, creating safety for us to talk, for us to cry, for us to laugh, for us to learn, for us to engage, for us to network in a space where we had home court advantage. That's what Race Reality is about. I can't wait to have a new cohort go. I think our first one is in May and our second one is October of next year. But this retreat is specifically for men of color to get us away from what our experiences have been here in the United States to try something different, to be somewhere different where we can slow down the heart rate that is elevated as soon as you walk out the door, sometimes leave your house, being in a space where you can wake up. And I promise you, it is a jungle. It is a jungle. So you will be interacting with nature in a very intimate way, So yeah, any specific questions about it, I'd love to answer for you.
Yeah, oh boy, oh boy. We probably end up in an entire additional conversation. So as we're closing, if folks do want to get more information about the work that you do, about race realities, about other things, some of the topics that you've brought up, what's the best way to get a
Well,
hold of
thank you
Matt?
for this experience, man. I really enjoyed this. This is a conversation, like you said, can go on forever. There are so many different stories and antidotes that I can offer. And I think if people are curious to learn more about what I do, they can find me on LinkedIn at Mat Jeanius, spelled MatJeanius. On LinkedIn, they can find me on all social platforms at Mat Jeanius, same way, Jeanius. I'm an author, I'm a musician, I'm a lot of things, but what I love the most is being with Black men and helping them find their way to wellness.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you. Thank you so much for your contributions and for your perspective on on therapy in general, on and particularly from your perspective as a therapist who just happens to have a cultural experience similar to mine. So again, thank you very much. So if you're watching or listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope something that you've heard will bring you back in the future. Previous episodes of this podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. You can watch, like, subscribe, and share the podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. You can actually join the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting and becoming a subscriber on LinkedIn. So until next time, stay tuned and look out for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Tune in each week for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to David at id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.